Hi crew, I've created this presentation around tools for triggers based on your feedback from what I asked how I could provide for the group. I've included some scenarios in here, and a lot of the content will be involved around the body and being able to breathe into those feelings. And I'll also put time code to various sections if you just want to jump to where I've got some scenarios and how you could potentially deal with them. I'll just reiterate that the majority of these will involve the body, and the majority will involve breathing and acknowledging what is going on for you to return yourself to a 0 point and clarity so you can make another decision and you can act from that space instead of a triggered space. All right. So as I was designing this presentation, it felt like it was important to touch on aspects of being triggered and the recovery, like if you want recovery or moving forward so you are no longer are affected by that same trigger. And I'll do another presentation on dissecting what triggering means. So the three options here, the three pathways. So the middle ground is the most popular, the seesaw. So that you will get triggered and then you will reset. And I see that as emotional triage, where you're basically putting a band-aid on and you just want to be able to go about your life after the triggering process. You want to get back into the relationship, get back to work, whatever it is. The pro in this is that you can have a decent quality of life. You can keep on this way for quite some time. The con is that the resets will have diminishing returns. And what I mean by diminishing returns is that each time you use it, it will become less effective. So this can take you down the path of pharmaceuticals or some other kind of stimulant outside of you that you need to regain that clarity point and potentially even push you up further into a high. Triggerdom, we're seeing this is quite common at the moment, where you live life as a victim to your wounding. And then you demand that the world be safe for you, or people outside of you make the world safe for you so you don't feel this discomfort. The pro from this is you can get a lot of attention. By being the victim, there's a lot of sympathy that can be harvested from people. The con is that you're not really free, and the friendships that you have will be inauthentic, and your actions will be inauthentic. So that will put you in a spiral of entitlement around people that you make friends with and what you want from the world, what you want the world to provide for you. The one I recommend is you choose growth. And so you have an ability to get triggered and maintain awareness that, oh wow, I can feel shame coming up. I can feel like, wow, I feel really angry. So you can feel that rapid spike in energy and can be aware of it. And then if you see it's a pattern, then you can revisit that triggering, that whole process around for the content and to heal it. So say it's with a partner and they keep saying something and it keeps like, what is this? Like, what is this feeling that keeps on coming up around partners in general? Or could be something around work, around responsibility. And the pro around this is you find freedom and you have authentic actions and you will find your purpose and faith in the growth of this. The con is that it requires work and dedication, which can involve setting time aside, sacrificing other things, time with hobbies or other aspects of your life in order just to work on yourself. In that process, you will find authentic friends when you do this. So those are the three pathways that I see. Now, triggers, there are highs and there are low triggers. And I felt like it was important to touch on this. Like in the highs, like people that are like devotees of like Tony Robbins or Martini, or the people that like to kind of push an elation or an excitation, and some evangelical churches do it too, where you excite everyone into a state of like a mania, and it makes you very suggestible. I felt that's a trigger response as well. I felt it was important to add that in. They can also like reframe you as less than, so you can use like a shaming process as well as here's the solution for your shame at the moment. So that's a trigger as well, to be aware of that. And the most common one that most people talk about in healing circles is the low response, where your energy goes down, you go in, which tends to play out in like apathy, melancholy, and depression over the long term. That can also be, depending on which way you see anger. I mean, anger is looked down upon as a negative emotion. So I feel like there's when you feel like, oh, I'm angry, like you judge your anger, that it's not meant to be there. So I felt important to make a distinction. There's high triggers and there's low triggers. Now, part of the solutions involve body awareness. Now, by design, social media keeps us in a state of being stimulated and excited. So it takes you out of your body, puts you into your head, and it makes it very easy for you to be suggestible. So do video games, so does porn, and some movies. I think porn is more pernicious than games or movies. However, they're all in a toolkit to help you stay stimulated, avoid the discomfort, and stay in your head. When you're in a stimulated state, you cannot be aware as well. You can't stay in your body. It's really hard to stay in your body. You can hear things. Something can be going on off in the distance, and because you're not present, you don't hear that conversation or the car coming or something that would mean to cause you harm. So body awareness is very important in returning to clarity. First of all, establishing that you are triggered, and then returning to clarity. So if you're persistently stimulated, you're going to find it much harder to return to clarity, or you will use this stimulation to avoid the feeling of discomfort that you got when you were triggered. So I guess toolkit wise and moving forward is that you need to make a choice of whether or not you want to be less stimulated, which means like cutting back on the social media. It means cutting back on things that you use to distance yourself from your own discomfort, where you choose not to feel that, and you go, oh, you know what, I'm going to go have a piece of cake, or you know what, I'm going to go make a cacao drink, or you know what, I'm going to go to the pub, or I'm going to jump on the internet, I'm going to watch a movie or read a book or do something else. Like, you avoid sitting in that discomfort. The next bit is you build an emotional container, and that is really important. If you can't feel your own body, if you can't have a container to hold your own emotions, it makes it really hard to bond with other people, because somebody else will say something that might trigger you, and then straight away you will not have space to hear what they have to say, nor be able to be present enough with your own emotions. Evaluating your environment. So what you keep in your environment. At the moment, I'm doing a spring clean, and I'm getting rid of books. I'm getting rid of like people in social media that I have no connection with anymore, including like friends from high school, people that I've just accepted as friends and have no idea who they are really. The food I have, I'm cleaning up the food in my house. Old social media posts, going through and looking at the posts and thinking about like what What was I feeling when I made that post, and does it still need to be there? So evaluating the environment means that you choosing what stimulus you want to have around you. Like if it doesn't bring you life, if it doesn't inspire you, then I'd suggest getting rid of it. If there's some kind of nostalgia attached to it, where it's like you long to be back in the past of around whatever that was, I'd question whether or not that's a healthy nostalgia to have. Like the present is, if once you acknowledge that the present is the most precious, you'll start to look at, well, I don't really need to keep that book anymore. Sure, it was given to me by somebody else, but I don't talk to them anymore. The book has no more value for me anymore, and I feel like I can pass that on to somebody else. Then evaluating yourself. So knowing what your intentions are, evaluating why are you doing something? Why are you here? Why are you in a situation with a person that continually triggers you? Are you learning from them, or are they being spiteful? Or is it just something in you that you feel like you need to learn? And a lot of this evaluation comes from like meditation or some other kind of spiritual practice or healing practice, where you have a milestone or something that you can gauge who you are against. That might be someone that you admire, it might be someone that you read about, or it might be you're evaluating yourself against yourself, where, you know what, tomorrow I'd like to wake up earlier and do this task. Or you know what, today I didn't eat as well as I could have, tomorrow I will eat better. Or today I didn't spend enough time just being with myself, I was spending a lot of time with family or friends or work, and I really need to spend time with myself. When you spend time with yourself, you build more body awareness. It's just you and your energy. You start to see how you react on your own without any external stimulus. I think those 4 attributes are really important. Now, building an emotional container, it really makes a big difference if you release the trauma and tension held in your body. Every morning I'm either on a roller, or I have my massage gun, or I'm like finding tight spots in my arms or my legs and just breathing into them and releasing them. And for me, that gives me, even sometimes a trauma release will start, and I'll just like sit in that and finish off the whole trauma release. It makes a big difference. I can feel my whole body, and I encourage the men that struggle to get massages and take care of themselves to do it. Like, ask around. Like, do you know a good masseuse? Or we can tell you. I go to an amazing one in Bondi, and I feel like how he works, he really puts you in your body, and he gives great feedback about your past. But releasing that body trauma in your muscles, particularly around your back and your legs, will make a big difference for you, because you start to feel your body. You can start to feel when you're tired. You can start to feel when you're angry, or when you feel shame. You can feel that heat and be conscious of that shame heat running from your feet all the way up your back into your face, and your face will go red. You can be, oh wow, I'm feeling shame right now, or it could be anger. Conscious breathing, being aware of your breath. Like, breath is life. So practices around breathing are very important. A lot of us hold our breath when we feel anxious, or when we're performing an activity, even during sex. It's very important for us to keep breathing and just be conscious of breathing, and try not to be hard on yourself when you do catch yourself not breathing efficiently. Just feel the remorse. I could have been breathing better for the last hour. You could have been working on something. And you allow yourself just to take a big, deep diaphragm breath and then keep on breathing. Encouraging expression of emotion. Now, it's very challenging for most men to be able to tell someone, I feel fucking angry at you right now, or I want to punch you right now, or allowing yourself to express how you feel. And developing an emotional vocabulary is key to that. So if you are feeling something and you don't know what that is to express it, then you're in a double bind. Giving yourself permission to feel and giving yourself permission to explore an emotional vocabulary is very important. From the whole rainbow of emotions, from sadness to grief to rage to fury to shame to guilt to joy to excitement to elation, to all of the feelings that you can think of, it's very important that you learn how to express those, because that is part of your emotional container. Practicing presence and grounding. This is very important. When you are talking to someone and when you feel in your body, you're less likely to be shaken by something that they say. You can do this in a crowded place. Me personally, I like walking in the city or walking in a group and just being aware of my own presence, like being aware of what I'm doing, what I'm thinking about, and feeling myself connecting into the ground. I walk barefoot quite a lot, and I feel like that touch with the ground is really important, because when you feel like it, you don't need to run away, when you don't need to escape from an uncomfortable position, you can just stand solid. Having your knees slightly bent as well is really helpful as well. When you lock your knees, there's a bodily response to be in the flight or fight or sympathetic. When you bend your knees, you're much more relaxed, much more grounded, and you can feel your body. You're not afraid. Evaluating the self, so that includes motivations, psychodynamic, establishing what is shame versus toxic shame. Psychodynamic is the unconscious habits that were born in your childhood and how they play out today. Very important in understanding patterns. You don't need to always look for a psychodynamic whenever you feel something. Sometimes it's just more important just to feel the feeling. So, momentary tools, again, communicate feelings to the other, like you're angry, you're sad, you're frustrated, foggy, anxious, overwhelmed, or frenetic. And these are situational. You can ground, so if you get triggered, like just be able to ground yourself. Even take a short break and then go and ground yourself. Allow yourself to feel the feelings to their fullest. I feel like we try and stop short, or we feel like the shame of like, oh, I'm not allowed to feel anger, or I'm not allowed to feel this feeling, this shame is like really, really uncomfortable. And check for clarity and presence. So once you've felt that, it's important to come back into yourself and ask, do I feel, am I clear? Do I feel present in myself, or can I still feel that tension and that turmoil for that conversation that I just had, or that email I just read? I'd also add like the other, communicating the feelings to the other. The other person can also be yourself. We can tell ourselves stories and we can trigger ourselves. Just take that in for a minute. You can tell yourself a story and you can trigger yourself. So if you're triggering yourself on a regular basis, then it's going to be very easy for somebody else to trigger you, because you'll have all of these neurological pathways set up to just be triggered. I think for yourself, it's even more important to express how you feel out loud. So if you happen to tell yourself a story or go back into the past of some previous relationship and you can feel that and you go, no, I feel really angry right now, say it to yourself. And the more you learn to connect your throat to your heart space or your feelings, you have much more strength around talking about how you feel. You can also describe what's going on in your body, like my face feels hot, I feel flushed. My hands feel really cold, and my feet feel really cold, or my heart is racing. So the more awareness you can bring to the body and you communicate to the other, you honor whatever is going on in your body. And it also helps in establishing what kind of partners that you want, or if you have a partner, it helps them understand how to read you. Whether a partner that speaks like this, like, oh wow, I feel really flushed right now. I mean, my heart is racing. It's a testament to how much work they've done on themselves. So it's a good metric, stable metric to establish like they do have a lot of body awareness. So coming back to check for clarity and presence, the recharge and reset. So depending on how big the trigger was, or if there was like a stacking of triggers, you might need to recharge and reset whatever that looks like for you. That could be a trip to the beach. That could be a nap. That could be going out by yourself and having a nice meal and just sitting with it, going out into the forest. If this is a pattern for you, you need to take it to a healer if you want to grow. So whatever your healer of choice is, I'd recommend somebody that works with the body and just talk it through. Like, what's going on? Like, what happened? Where have you seen this in the past? How does this relate to your upbringing? And just allow yourself, and then that whole process, you'll be able to uproot whatever that trigger is. I feel like hacking at the leaves is very inefficient. When you take a pattern to a healer and you establish what that psychodynamic was, that underlying pattern from childhood, makes a huge difference in your life. And I feel like everybody deserves to be free, but it's also a choice to be free. I'll jump into some scenarios around common scenarios where you feel like this might, where you'll feel like common triggers come up. So this is in work and in relationships. Here we've got blamed for something you didn't do, where you feel like you're, and that can bring up shame for you straight away, particularly if you had siblings or a parent that wasn't very present and had great difficulty accepting responsibility, and you will be blamed for something that you were not even in the area, you had nothing to do with it, and that can bring up a shame response in you. Again, it's being able to breathe into it. Like it's most of the time it's about the other person. So if you can feel into it and go, you know what? The other person has said this, and this could be completely about them, and just allow them to express whatever they need to express. And then if it brings up a trigger in you, it's like, well, maybe there's something in me that I'm always being blamed for something that I didn't do. And when you take that to a healer, if that's a pattern, then you can start to unstitch why that continuously happens for you. But in this instance, just breathe into it. And then be honest about the reaction. I didn't do that. That wasn't me. Or I'm feeling a lot of shame around this at the moment. I didn't do anything, but I'm feeling like my body is reacting like I did do something, even though I didn't do it. Ultimatums, where someone will, like, if this doesn't happen, then this is definitely going to happen. That can bring up a lot of shame for people, particularly if your parents would like threaten divorce or threaten turning the car around if you didn't behave a certain way. Again, this is where the larger container that you have, you can either make a choice of, well, either I can walk away from this, or is it more about the other person? What are they struggling with? Where is it in them? They feel like that they feel so helpless that they have to use an ultimatum, or it could just be completely unconscious. Breath is super important for all of these. So if you can feel a situation coming up with someone where tension is starting to build, like, just start to breathe deeply. Just allow yourself to just breathe and be present. When you hold your breath, it stops you from feeling. Neediness or smothering. when you feel like that claustrophobic feeling of when a partner or someone that's close to you is hounding you for either attention or is not leaving you alone, that can bring up parts of us that you don't want to hurt the person that you love, but on the same hand, you feel like you just need some time alone, you just need some space. By breathing into that again, you can honor the other person and then do whatever is right for you. And then depending on the relationship, because I feel like relationships are slightly more complex, particularly if you've made an agreement to grow together, where it's like we want to do inner work together. So it might involve more communication, where it's like, you know what, I'll get back to you in 30 minutes or an hour, or depending on the relationship, I might get back to you tomorrow. Or I'm not going to leave you. I see you, I love you, and I will get back to you when I feel like I need to get back to you. I'm still going to be here. I'm not leaving you. Which, depending on your attachment style, that can, if you're an anxious avoidant style attachment, then that can be very reassuring when you give someone a time limit. Distancing or stonewalling. So on the back of this, if you feel the other person is moving away from you or stonewalling, that can bring up a lot of triggers too. Particularly if you had parents that whenever it got emotionally uncomfortable, they would disappear and go and do something else, or try and change the subject, or it's completely shut down emotionally and not answer any questions, or just have an energy of like a fuck off energy. Again, breathe into it and acknowledge that there's something going on for you, whether it's the feeling of anxiety around somebody emotionally shutting down or wanting to get away from you because you're feeling something, or your feelings are making somebody else uncomfortable. Another trigger is like when you're waiting to see someone and they don't appear happy to see you. Like they don't greet you how you expect to be greeted, or they just don't have the same reciprocation of emotion that you have in seeing them. And that can bring up stuff in us as well. Again, breathe into it, acknowledge what your body is doing. It's about you, and it's also about them. So you have an expectation around what you wanted to see from them, and they might be feeling that they don't want to share that with you. They might be in a completely different headspace or body space to what you're in. Something may have just happened before they rocked up. But that aside, it's more just acknowledging what you're feeling. Unrealistic deadlines. So at work, you might know how long something takes, but then your boss who doesn't will keep stacking on tasks for you. And in the workplace, it's either, well, you can explain to your boss, this is too much for me. But before that, you really need to acknowledge all of your feelings. You need to acknowledge that you feel overwhelmed and bring yourself back into that space of clarity. And then once you get into that space of clarity, it's like you only know you can complete X amount of tasks in the next few hours, or that this task needs to be dropped off. And the more awareness that you bring to your body around when you're feeling triggered, the better equipped you become at dealing with more triggers in future. Cascading responsibility, where similar to unrealistic deadlines, you feel this like an overwhelming sense of responsibility, whether it's from children, partners, friends, lovers, whatever it is. There's this like, oh, there's all this responsibility on me. Even looking at social media and things around social activism, where there's an element of guilt and shame put on to anyone that's reading it, around that you need to do this, you need to be this certain way. And there can be an existential grief, an existential responsibility put on you, and you receive that, And that can also add into cascading responsibilities. Again, breathe into your body and acknowledge what is going on. The more strength you come into yourself and acknowledge who you are as a person, your sovereignty, and what you want to be responsible for, other people's responsibilities become less important and less suffocating for you. Being blamed for somebody else's feelings, like, you made me feel this, or you made me feel that, or energetically as well. Again, acknowledge that you can't help that, who they are, how they respond to how you respond. In relationships, it might be a bit different. Ultimately, it's you are responsible for your feelings, whatever that looks like. Again, if that's triggering for you, like if a parent blamed you for how they felt, you make mummy angry, or you make dad angry, you make mum feel ashamed of you, or even using religious manipulation around like Jesus or the afterlife, you're being blamed for some kind of action or being blamed for an outcome. And I feel like that's it's very triggering for a lot of men around, especially if they love the other person that's telling them. Like, you don't want to make somebody else feel bad, but that situation can bring up feelings around, oh no, I'm responsible for everybody else's feelings, which you're not. So again, you just got to breathe into it. Acknowledge that, your feelings are your own and the other person's feelings are their own, and you don't have to take responsibility for somebody else's feelings. Helplessness. When you feel out of control and there's nothing that you can do to solve a situation or help a situation. For me personally, I didn't realize my passport had expired recently. And when I went to check in online and I checked my passport, and I was like, oh my God, like my passport's like a year out of expiry. And it dropped me into this helplessness wound that there's nothing that I can do. I'm not going to be able to get it ready in time before I need to go away. And it was painful, but it was also it was a rewarding gift of how it's played out so far. But again, for me, like, I could feel the shame. I could feel this helplessness and this failure and like this, the cold sweats like running over my whole body. And I just had to breathe into it. I actually lied down and just stayed on my back for a while and just breathed into my body and just surrendered to the helplessness and just felt it. Criticizing or judgment. When someone criticizes or judges you for some kind of action, whether it's something that you've said, or action, or a book that you're reading, or the way you dress, or music that you listen to, or how you behave in public, all of this can bring up wounding or a trigger around that. It's really up to you whether or not you want to keep a person like that in your life, for one. And again, you just got to breathe into it. And this will be the theme. It's about breathing into the feeling and allowing it to exist. When you resist the feeling, all you do is amplify it. You reduce your clarity. You become very reactive. Like, there's, in honoring the feeling, you create space around it just to be. Comparisons and generalizations. Again, you just breathe into it. Comparisons around, like, when you compare yourself to somebody else, or when someone generalizes you, like, oh, all men are like this, or if you were more like your father, or if you were less like your father, or you remind me just of your mother, or, my ex used to do this as well. And that can be quite painful, particularly if the partner that you're with has told you a lot of stories around who their ex was, and as soon as they make that comparison to you, to that ex, it can bring up all this flooding of feelings around, that's not who I am. So this ego conflict, and then you want to appease that partner, or you might not want to appease that partner. And it brings up a trigger that you're not perfect. Brings up the shame that, you're worthless, or you're hopeless, or you're not good enough. And again, you've got to breathe into it and acknowledge it and allow it to be. Compliments can bring up triggers. Men struggle with receiving, genuinely receiving. We're very quick to receive a compliment and then want to give one back. Like, I love you too. Like, there's a moment there when you can receive whatever somebody is telling you, and that can bring up a trigger as well. Like, you don't want to believe that what they're telling you is true, especially if you had parents that were quite manipulative, and they would compliment you in a way in order to get something from you, like with strings attached. So there's an expectation built into you around, I have to give this compliment back, or there's some strings attached, which can be quite triggering. Again, with compliments, like, breathe and accept it and bring it in. Just allow it to be. Honor that person is telling you the truth and take it in. As soon as you feel like there's an intent to manipulate around that, it's very hard to be grateful, and it's very hard to receive. I touched on before shame, and it's a big component of triggers. Toxic shame, like I'm a mistake, it is hopeless, I am no good, I am worthless, I have no power, I cannot choose. Versus healthy shame, where I can and will make mistakes. Making mistakes is a part of the human condition, and they can be remedied. Realistic limits on power and responsibility. I need help when I reach my limits. So there's an element to toxic shame which makes you either less than human or superhuman. So between those two, the dichotomy, there's a healthy shame in the middle, where you're allowed to be human. Like, it's a forgiving sense. This allows you to feel remorse. So when you're breathing into those feelings, and particularly with a partner, and you may have let a partner down, like, just being able to breathe into that and acknowledge the remorse. Now, if you've made a promise and you were not able to fulfill it, just acknowledge that. Or a friend, you made a promise to a friend, like, I'll meet you here at a certain time, or I'll buy you this gift, or whatever it is, like, I won't damage your car when I take it out, and you end up damaging their car. In order to be human, there's a requirement for you to feel that shame and honor that. Just feel that you've let someone down and feel the remorse, and then apologize from the remorse if you feel like you need to apologize. But breathing into it and having the container to hold the shame and the other person's expectation is really important. Okay, normalized drama. So triggers can be addictive, particularly if you were raised in a family that was riddled with drama. It becomes like a drug. It becomes like the reason to exist. You don't feel alive unless you're feeling some kind of trigger. This can also lead to people-pleasing and mood alteration, like using drugs or whatever it is to perpetuate the cycle of being elated, or the up and down cycle of just being triggered and then repairing, and then triggered and repairing. So this can become a pattern if you were raised in a household that was a bit bipolar, or you didn't have a father in the household, or the mother was emotionally unavailable, or the dad was emotionally unavailable. There's a polarization that occurs in you, which you only ever really feel alive when there is tension, which is where taking stock of your environment, taking stock of your surroundings, and like, have you moved into a household where there's just non-stop tension, where one roommate is always at the other roommate's throat? There's always something going on. And there may even be a part of you that people pleases to hold the peace. A part of you that wants to like clean up after somebody else to try and just keep the peace. That's a coping strategy to avoid the tension, but it's also addictive. Again, all of this stuff requires you to be aware of what is going on in your body. So it's one thing to know all this. It's another thing to know what is actually going on in your body when a triggering is coming up for you. This is the end, and I've got a list of references there that I've drawn on for this presentation. Feel free to have a look, and they're really good books, and I recommend them, particularly the Bad Boyfriends, Using Attachment Theory to Avoid Mr. or Mrs. Wrong and Make You a Better Partner. Again, it's very heady. A lot of these books are quite heady, and they will all give you some framework to understand potentially what's been going on in your relationships, or helping to identify the kind of partner that you might want in the future. I feel like these are all really important on the path of self-development and growth. And I thank you for listening to what I have to say. And if you have any comments, feel free to post. Any recommendations I can make more of these presentations on, I would love to hear from you. Much love, and I will see you around. Cheers.